Thank you for just invading our midst, God. Thank you that you are so present, and thank you for walking alongside us and for living inside us and inspiring us to come together, God, and to worship you, Lord. I thank you for the time of worship that we just shared, and God, I just pray that you direct this time together tonight, God, that your words would flow, and Lord, that you be preparing hearts, to just hear your voice, Lord. So God, I just pray that anything of me would fall away, and that everything of you will remain. And we just want to worship you tonight. So I just praise your holy name. Amen. So thanks for coming. I'm really excited, actually, to be able to share about my journey with the Lord over the last few years, specifically journeying with Jesus around the world. And it's so much fun to just get to share story. So I was really excited. Ruth asked me a while back if I would be willing to take some time during Equip. And so I've been asking the Holy Spirit all day today and earlier what to share, and actually he gave me a picture in worship downstairs, so I'm feeling like that's what I'm going to start with. So as we were praying for this city, as we were singing, "You're a God of this city," I saw a picture of a plant, and it was somewhat small, but it was green and growing out of the ground, and I felt in myself as I was looking at it, like a little bit of this feeling of like, how do I water it? What do I need to do? How do I, like in my mind thinking, I need to take care of this plant. Like, this is beautiful, but not knowing how to water it. And then I saw myself dancing in like a rainstorm. And it just being like a full out thunderstorm, rain, and I was dancing, and I felt like the Lord was saying, all you have to do is ask me for the rain, and your job is to dance in the rain. And I feel like sharing that right now because part of me getting to share these stories is us learning to dance in the rain, which is joy to me. So this is an example of joy. So that's my prayer tonight, is that when we get to share story and just let hearts connect over what God has done, praising Him for story, for who He is, that we're learning together to dance in His rain and of His provision, His goodness, and His joy, and that brings joy. And so I hope that you guys can feel the joy that I get. I'm just going to share for Jesus tonight then. So, the theme kind of where all of these stories is hinged is saying yes to the Father, saying yes to God. So, a little bit of background about me, and then I'll explain kind of what my journey has looked like internationally with the Lord. Just so you can get some context and kind of hear a little bit of my heart as it's been molded to be a yes heart, a heart that says yes. It starts off with, I felt like this was actually, it's an important part of my testimony that I'm just going to briefly share because it fuels kind of where I ended up going around the world. So in 2010, I actually was going through one of the hardest times of my life. I had just lost my fiance, he had passed away, and I had entered into this time of grieving and of darkness and really like hopelessness and depression. I was really seeking like numbness from going after the things of the world, and was thinking that could kind of numb this pain that I was feeling. And so in that season, it was about 2 whole years, actually, where I was just in a really challenging place, but God was very present and definitely working. But through that time, I actually encountered the Holy Spirit for the very first time. And after that encounter with the Holy Spirit, God really ignited my heart for His heart for the world. That part of my healing journey out of that really dark time was to look, instead of at my own pain and the loss and the lack, and to look at what He was doing around the world and how I could participate. And so it was kind of a shifting. As I was healing, it was a shifting that God was doing in my heart to show me that actually when I give, I receive a lot as well. And that's much more secure than anything I had had before. And so I was in 2010, I guess August, September is when I chose to go on something called the World Race. Not the Amazing Race, as was advertised earlier. The Amazing Race is a TV show where you win $1 million. I did not win $1 million.
What is the name of the organization?
The organization is called the World Race. But
Not Amazing Race.
yeah, we're laughing about not the Amazing Race because that's a TV show. So it wasn't a TV show. But what it was is an 11-month missions journey around the world to 11 different countries.
Wow.
And so, so what I was saying yes to was, yeah, pretty much selling everything that I had and agreeing to live out of a backpack for 11 months and travel the world, spending approximately 1 month in each different country and working alongside different believers and just asking the Lord what He wanted to do in those places with community, intense community. So it was really kind of amazing because the process even of me saying yes to this was not easy. And so I was coming out of, the reason I shared about the time I was coming out of is because I didn't really think, I was kind of like, who am I that God could use me to do this? Like, I've just been a mess, and I have all of this stuff still. Like, I'm not the missionary or something like that you would think. I thought that all of that disqualified me from being able to go out and actually make a difference. And actually what God was teaching me was that what He wanted most was my heart, a willingness to say yes, and that He could mold me into whatever He had for me to do. And so I ended up going on the World Race, and so we went to 11 different nations. And we started in the Philippines, so I'll just tell you what the 11 countries were, and then kind of talk a little bit more about what God did through that. But the countries that I visited, that I served in, were the Philippines, Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, India, Nepal, and Romania and Ukraine. So I actually ended my time in Europe. Yeah, what was really incredible was that God was so specific in showing me that I had so much to learn about His character and His heart. But really, it wasn't about me figuring it out or me having everything together before I said yes. It was just about me saying yes and being willing to step out. And so one of the things that I think is really, really amazing about God is that He will call us and then He'll qualify us. And so when we say yes to Him, then He is very, very present to give us everything that we need to move forward into those situations, whatever they may be. And so as I was learning to say yes, I was encountering His Holy Spirit like I'd never experienced before. And so one story in particular comes to mind that was really encouraging in the season before I stepped out to leave. So how the World Race worked is you got accepted, you were placed on a route, they called it. There were different ones that left at different times during the year. So I was leaving in September. So that meant 2 months before, in July, I had to go to Georgia and to stay on a farm and have a 10-day camp where you met your team and you got placed on a team and you met the leaders and you worshiped together and you kind of got ready to go. And it was basically like boot camp. So they kind of wanted to test out whether you could make it or not as well. So they made us like hike really early in the morning with like heavy backpacks and like do all this like stuff. Eat like fish head soup and stuff. Eat soup with fish heads and stuff. So lots of challenges. But what was amazing was after that time they actually asked me to be one of the team leaders. And so we had a group that it's called a squad. And there were 36 people on the squad. And then they split us into 6 different teams. So there were 6 leaders. And so they asked me to be one of those 6 leaders. And so that was awesome, but also felt like a kind of a big responsibility. And so then we left train camp. We had 2 months then before we were supposed to leave. And so during that time, the leaders were tasked with several specific things that we were supposed to be doing, which was praying for our team, asking God for words for our teammates and asking God for, just his heart and his vision for this team and really a love for this team. And so through that, I was learning a lot about the Holy Spirit, and I was feeling totally in over my head, if that makes sense, completely out of place, but God was showing up. So one time in particular, I remember I was at a place very near and dear to me in Ohio. It's a friend's farm, and I was laying in a hammock. And I had taken that day to pray for my team that we were getting ready to go. And so one really good friend of mine and I decided to go out to this farm, which had been a very safe place for us, a place we had house church. And so she and I got there and we looked at each other and said, okay, now we need alone time. So you go wherever and I'm going to go over here. We'll meet later. And so I went down and I was praying and supposed to be reading my Bible and I fell asleep, which is just real life. So in this moment, just feeling pretty weak, but ended up falling asleep in the hammock and woke up with this verse in my heart, Romans 15:13. And honestly, at the time, I didn't know what it was. That was just, the words were in my head, and I'm like, I hear you, God. Okay, I'm going to look it up. And so it says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy, peace in his presence, as you trust in him. And so, so it's an incredible verse, and I'm going to read it as well. But at that time, it just really impacted me, and it felt like, okay, God, I feel like you're speaking this over me and over my team specifically. And so I wrote it down, and then, spent some more time in the hammock. And after a little while, maybe an hour or two, I went to find my friend. And so my friend had been in a completely different part of the farm, came back, and she said, I'm so excited. God gave me a verse for you and for your team. I was praying for you guys, and I'm just so excited about this. And I'm like, oh, cool, show me. So she opens her journal, and in it she had written Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with love. And I was just looking at her like, God does this? This is crazy. What? And so then I opened my journal up, and we held them next to each other and just started crying because we were like, okay, God, I guess that's the verse that you're speaking to us right now. I hear you.
Maybe I should read.
Maybe I should listen. But I share that just because it was such a transformational time for me, because I felt like I hadn't ever experienced the Holy Spirit like that. And it really was just a willingness and an openness for me to say, okay, God, I will step into this leadership position. I will step into this thing that feels scary, and trust that you will show up. And so that was one very specific way that he showed up, and that verse really carried me through. I'm going to read it real quick just because I love it. Romans 15:13, because I didn't have it down all the way. Which is, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And so this verse, really from that point on, has been very near and dear to my heart. But it really kind of flowed through each situation we encountered as we left the comforts of home, as we stepped out and said, okay, God, we need to trust you for provision. We all had to raise money in order to go, and so I raised $14,000 for the year. God raised it. But he showed up in incredible ways. Provided every single thing that we needed, and I was fully funded before I even left the country, which was incredible. So we saw God showing up in amazing ways. And so some of the ways that I saw God show, I'll share some of those fun stories. But first, also while I was praying this morning about tonight, this phrase came to mind, which I just want to share, which is, God just reminded me that it is so much fun to be the answer to someone's prayer. And so that just kind of washed over me as I was kind of fighting off fear of speaking tonight and having any sense of weightiness to this, but just God reminding me, it is so much fun when he shows us how we've been an answer to someone's prayer. Really let that sink in. Has there ever been a time in your life when you know that you have been an answer to someone's prayer? And so throughout the year on the road race, we saw time after time that we were actually answers to prayer, and that other people were answers to our prayers. So one story that comes to mind is we were in Rwanda. And so we actually were supposed to go to Uganda, but we found out about 2 weeks before we were supposed to go there that there was a political something going on, elections. And so because of the election, there'd actually been a lot of political stuff going on, protests and everything, and they just said, maybe it's not the safest time for you guys to go to Uganda to be there. And so the host that we were planning on meeting just said, yeah, this just isn't a good time for you guys to come. So really quickly, we had 2 weeks to figure out, okay, God, where else do you have for us to go? So we ended up taking a bus to Rwanda, which was about a couple hours away. So we ended up going to Rwanda. So at that time, it felt very much like, and it feels very rushed and very kind of chaotic. So we get to Rwanda, we find a host family, ended up being actually a young 20-something guy who was in charge of 9 of his siblings because his parents had passed away. And so this like incredible guy who opened his home to these 4 random missionaries. And so it ended up being an amazing experience, but most of our ministry that month was waking up and going, okay, Jesus, what do you want us to do this today? Because nothing has been planned or organized. And while that could seem scary or stressful, it actually was beautiful because we were forced to step out and to just trust the words that we were hearing and the scriptures that God was giving us. And so, what the pastor was doing. And so one day the pastor came to our house and he said, we're going to walk around the village and we're just going to go pray for people. And so we're just going to start knocking on doors. We're not telling them we're coming, we're just knocking on all the doors and then we're going to pray for them. And so one of the very first houses that we ended up going to, before we were walking up to the door, before we could even get to like the front step, we were in the front yard still, which wasn't really a yard, but like the front area. This woman came running like full speed out of her house, and you could just tell she was so happy, like joy flowing. And so our pastor was translating for us because she was saying things in Rwandan that we didn't understand. And he said she was saying, oh my goodness, you're here, I can't believe you're here. And we were like, what do you mean we're here? Do we know you? Have we met you before? What's going on? And she just starts like speaking like really quickly. And so he translates and he says, she had a dream last year. And you 4 were the ones that were in her dream.
Wow.
And we just stood there like, okay. And so she's explaining all this and then crying also, but like super happy and just, we were shocked just standing there thinking, God, we weren't even supposed to be here. We were supposed to be in Uganda. We weren't even supposed to be in Rwanda. And like her utter joy and her genuineness was like palpable. And so it was such an incredible moment of being the answer to someone's prayer. Like in that moment we knew we're supposed to be here. So God, show us what to do. And so we got to pray for her and encourage her and encourage the rest of the village. And it was amazing, super encouraging. So encouraging for our team as well. We needed it at that time. And so as God was speaking that phrase over me this morning, I was remembering that moment. Also, so in the Philippines, it was our first month on the World Race, so I would say we were like, I don't know, newbies to the experience. We were a little bit shy, still figuring out our team, how to work together. And we were in the middle of Manila, which is a crazy, bustling city, like chaos, dirty, like loud, all the things. And so it was pretty chaotic. And so one of the pieces of the ministry we were working with would go out to the slums and do ministry. And so they would meet people, form relationships, provide food, like different supplies if people needed it. And so the year before, a different World Race team had been with that ministry. And they'd been working with the slum ministry, and they'd met this mom, single mom, and she had a couple kids, but one baby, a newborn baby at the time. And the newborn, that when they met him, was really malnourished, like really, really skinny, and like just really not doing well. And so at that time, they were able to work with the ministry to connect this mom and her baby to the ministry, and they were going to be providing formula because the child actually ended up having cleft palate. You guys know what that is? Like it's a hole in the top of your mouth. So he wasn't able to feed, so that's why he was so malnourished, is because he wasn't getting the nourishment he needed. And so we had heard this story about this little baby boy. And we actually heard about it after we were already in the Philippines. And so through the leader contacting us, she said, oh, you guys are with the same ministry we were with a year ago. It would be amazing if you could go find this little baby boy and see how he's doing. Like, we'd love to have an update. A year ago, he was not doing well, but he's supposed to have been getting on his formula. Can you find him? And we're like, that would be incredible. Do you have any information at all on how we can find him? No. No information. So, unfortunately, the ministry too was like, we go to many slums, like all over the city. We have many, many families. Like, we don't have any idea who this baby is. Sorry. And so, as a team, we just were like, okay, like God, if you want us to find this child, you're gonna have to show us. As crazy, it's like a needle in a haystack. We didn't even know which slum area. Like, we had no idea. So we prayed, and we just kind of left it in God's hands. Well, a couple of days later, we found out there's an organization called Operation Smile. I think it's from the States. But they do free surgeries for children, specifically, who are impoverished and that need like that cleft palate surgery. And so they do like free services in order to help the poor. And so they're it's a nonprofit, but they can only take a certain amount. So they come into cities, these big cities, and they do events, and then they open it up, and everybody comes and applies, and then the ones that they can, they have like a limit, and then they say, this is how many you can do. And so it was like 100 or something. It wasn't a huge amount. And so we found out that they were going to be around. And so this leader that we've been talking to was like, this would be so perfect for that baby that we were talking about. And we're like, well, we don't know how to find him, but okay. So, but we still like felt even stronger, like, God, if you could have us find him. Granted, we're only here for 3 more weeks. And this clinic was going to be there like 2 weeks later or something, like in the time that we were there. And so we ended up just praying, and we were connected to a woman who would go to many different slums at a lot of different times. And so she said, you can come with me a couple times and see and ask around, because this cleft palate isn't so common, so maybe someone knows. And so we ended up going with her. And I remember driving for 2 hours into slums, like in just these little twisty alleys, and seeing so many different people, and we're like, there's no way we're ever going to find this child. And it was actually the last one that we went to, the first day. And yeah, we were just asking, and it was actually the translator that was asking for us. And she kept asking, and they're like, yeah, we know who you're talking about. Like, yes, come with us. And so we ended up getting out of the van and like walking for like a long time, 45 minutes or something, through the slums and through all these tiny little things. And she brings us straight to the home of this woman with the baby, and his name's baby Jason. And I remember just seeing him, and he looked healthy, and he was like plump and like happy and like really great, but still had the cleft palate, but the formula that they'd been feeding him was working, and so it had been actually. So we were elated. So then we were able, through the translator, to connect them with this organization that was going to have the clinic. And the mom at first was like, there's no way that I can get there, I have to work, like all these things. And so, long story short, we were able to help her. We provided the transportation, so we got to go pick her and Jason up, take them to the clinic. We stayed with them through the line, helped get everything, and he ended up being selected, even though there were hundreds and hundreds of kids there. We spent all day with them, waiting in line, and then he was selected to be one of like 100 that were chosen for the surgery. And so it turned out the surgery was going to be the next week, so it was our last week there. So we actually got to go pick them up then for the surgery, bring them to the hospital, drop them off, and then pick them up after the surgery was done and take them to dinner. And just to be able to be the hands and feet in that time just felt like so timely and so gracious of God. To be able to report that back to the other team that had seen him the year before felt so special. And just felt like such the grace of God to be connecting people at the right time, in the right place, because we knew there was no other way other than Jesus like directing us to that woman's house. And so that was a pretty incredible way to start the year. Our first month, we were like, the bar's been raised, Jesus. We're ready to see the things in your kingdom, wants to invade. And so throughout the entire year, I really continued to encounter places that were uncomfortable, places that were maybe just scary sometimes. My first 4 months on the World Race, I was with an all-girls team. And so there were 6 of us, and I was the leader. And so sometimes being in a third world nation, like, it would be nice to have a male presence with you, just for safety even. But we didn't have that, and so we really were challenged to be like trusting in God as our Father and our protector, and really were protected. I'm confident in several different ways, and so got to encounter just the ways that God is moving all around the world, opening my heart up to how He could use my story, and the ways that I thought were weaknesses or things that would disqualify me were actually the ways that I could connect to people, because we all understood challenge, and we all, like a lot of the people that I got to share story with, didn't matter what country, what nation they were from, were encountering God's goodness and His faithfulness through story and through the things that we were able to do. And so, as we continued throughout the year, God kept challenging us in certain ways to be trusting in Him for provision. And so one of the other aspects of this year was we had a very small budget. We had raised a lot of money, but that money goes quickly when you have a team that needs to eat and you need to travel and things like that. So we actually had a budget of $1 US dollar per person per meal.
Crazy.
Per meal per day, so $3.
So it's $3. In Europe, we got to do $4. We got $2
Oh.
I know. So it was pretty hard as a team leader, actually, because I was in charge of a lot of the budget. But God provided in amazing ways. And in Europe, it was, or in Asia, it was easier in certain places. In India, you could eat for quite a lot on the dollar. But when you got to Romania, it was a little bit more challenging. So we had been seeing God show up all throughout. And actually, I won't share this whole story, but we saw one of the teams, I was not physically there, but they were staying with us and they were part of our group. We're doing a ministry in the Philippines, in the slums, same time we were going out. And they were doing a feeding ministry, like where they would provide food for kids in the afternoons. And they saw food multiplied, actually, at that time, where Jesus just like provided enough. They had planned a certain amount for 250 children, like with certain portions. And they did this every week, so they knew kind of how much. 350 kids came that week. Every single kid had a completely full, like, dish. Like, they kept scooping it, and they just kept scooping it. And it just didn't run out until they were done. And so they came back to our base, like, we were there, and they were flipping out because Jesus was, like, providing. So we'd seen that the first month, and we knew God would provide. Like, we knew He would provide. So month 10 on the race, we arrived in Romania. It's the first time I stepped foot in Europe. And realized that our budget was going to be really challenging. And so we were getting creative of, like, we could make soup, make it last. We could make spaghetti, make it last. Like, what can we do with this budget? And pretty quickly realized, like, we didn't have enough. Like, the money was not going to last for the amount that we were needing for different things. And so I think it was, we had 1 week left. And, well, actually 2 times before that in the month, every few nights, myself and one of the other teammates would sit down and we'd look at the budget, and then we'd count all the money that we had left. And we had to record everything, because we had to save all our receipts and, like, send them in. So there was high accountability for every cent that was spent. And so 2 different times I remember sitting on her bed in the home we were staying in and counting out the money, and we'd been very meticulous. I had a little notebook I carried with me, and I had to write down every single little thing. And we opened it up and we had 20 extra euros. Like just, it was just there that God provided. Like, and I remember both of those times just being like, where did this come from? Where? Okay, God, thank you. Like, this is awesome. And so then as the month continued, God was actually speaking to us a lot about asking him for things and trusting that he's a good father that cared about the details, the smallest details. I remember one time just joking around with my teammates in the house in the morning, saying something like, oh, I wish we had ice cream, I really love ice cream. And like 20 minutes later, the pastor walked in with ice cream. Like, it was moments like that where we were like, God, this is either a cool coincidence or like, you're moving and we know it. And so it was just like story after story that month in particular, where God was just really showing us his abundance and his delight, and showing us that our yes hearts were being answered by his presence. And we were just having so much fun. And so even for the pastor to be like our answer to prayer, like the joy would spread because of what we were encountering when we realized that relationship was so close with him. And so at the end of the month, we were running out of food, and we were running out of money for food. And so we were actually going through the refrigerator for like our last meal. We kind of didn't have a backup plan, but we'd been praying, God, provide. And so we had come up with like this soup that we were going to make that we were hoping would last for a couple meals. And so we had like carrots and different things. It was going to be a vegetable soup. And we wanted a cabbage. Like, we just thought a cabbage would make this, I don't know why, but we just thought this is what we'll, like, for some reason we wanted a cabbage. I have no idea why. Yeah, right. There you go. I don't know. And we needed a lighter for the stove. And I think the other one we had had just run out. So we needed a lighter, we needed cabbage. And so I just said, like the team was getting things ready, and I said, I'll run around the corner to the market, I'll get the cabbage, and I'll get the lighter. So I leave, and I go to the market, and I'm trying, if you can picture in your minds, trying to communicate with the shopkeeper who does not speak English, that I need a lighter, cabbage. So I'm obviously struggling quite a bit, and they are not understanding. Like, the lady behind the counter was like, crazy. And so this woman in the store, which was this tiny little market, this woman said, I speak English, can I help you? Like, she could tell that I was really struggling. And I was like, yes, please. And I said, I want a cabbage and a lighter. Which sounds weird. And she goes, oh, a cabbage? Well, just come to my house, I have cabbage. And I kind of was like, what? And she goes, yeah. And so she said something to her daughter, who was next to her, who was like 7 or 8. And she said, go with my daughter, it's right around the corner, there's cabbage there, it's fine, you can just go get cabbage. So I got my lighter, and I followed this 7-year-old girl out the door. And it literally was just right around the corner on the way to my house, so it was between the market and my house. And the little girl like showed me in the gate, and by the time we got in the gate, then the mom was there. And the mom said, oh, I'll just start, I'll get the cabbage. And she starts going through the garden, and she starts pulling out vegetables, like different vegetables than just a cabbage. She pulled out cabbages, and she's sorting through them. And I'm not saying anything. I'm just standing there kind of going, I'm going to have to pay for this. Like, what am I doing? What is this? And she's pulling out vegetables, and she's picking the best ones. So I can tell that she's like sorting through, like, no, that one's not enough, like not good enough. And she's picking the best ones, and she's laying them aside. And the vegetable pile is getting bigger. It's getting bigger, and she's adding to it. And finally, I just stopped her and said, I'm so sorry if there's a miscommunication. Like, I'm so sorry, but I can't actually pay for this. After she's already pulled them all out of the garbage, I'm like, I'm really sorry. And she goes, no, it's free. It's for free. Of course it's for free. And I'm just looking at her now because it's like this huge pile of vegetables. And I'm staring, and she goes, do you want a chicken? Do I? Okay. And then she's like looking at me, and it's almost like sinking in, and she goes, it's a live chicken. No. Okay, you're going to come eat at my house for dinner tonight. So she bags up all the vegetables and gives them to me and says, come back to my house for dinner. And I'm like, okay, there's 4 of us. Like, is that okay? She's like, yes, please, come back. And so I am just like mind blown. Like this is, I had gone to the market to get cabbage and I'm coming back with like a bag full of vegetables, a free dinner tonight, and like a new friend. And so we actually have a video of me like busting through the front door, which is pretty hilarious. They're like, oh guys, what? I don't believe what happened, because they're just like, what? They were getting worried about me actually, because I've been gone so long and I didn't know before. So anyways, we ended up going back as a team and eating with her, and she had made a beautiful dinner, like cooked her chicken and vegetables and cake and like just went all out. And it was a mom and her daughter and a grandmother. So it was 3 women, 3 generations in this home. And you could tell that they didn't have a lot. Like it wasn't that there was like tons of abundance or anything. They just were super attentive to need and just super generous. And so we ended up eating dinner there every night that week and having more than enough. They ended up being our ride to the airport.
Awesome.
They ended up we called them our guardian angels, because they just showered us with love. And in the meantime, we got to share our story and share who we were and share life. And they didn't know the Lord. And like we just, we got to share who Jesus is and why we were there and how much Jesus had used them in our lives to bless us. And so it was really such a beautiful moment of just God totally showing up at exactly the right time and us just really getting to just be immersed in His extravagant love, which was so incredible and so good. I think one of the things I also was learning was sometimes I didn't even know what to ask for, but it was just that heart of God, like, I know you're good. I know that you've called us here, you've brought us here, you've showed us that we're supposed to be here, and you're going to connect us. We don't speak the language, we don't fit in, like, we're kind of a motley little group, but you're going to use us, and He did, and He kept using us. And so that time in Romania carried into the next story, which is my favorite story, I think, from the year, mostly because the Father's love was just being poured out on us, and it was such a tangible moment, time of really just feeling super close, like God's presence. So between our 10th and 11th months, the last 2 months, we were going from Romania to Ukraine. And traditionally with the other countries, you would, as all the teams were in different places throughout the country, so this is how it worked. We traveled as a giant group, a squad, to a country. So we came to Romania, and then we would be in a city, possibly a YWAM base or some kind of place that could house all of us, or a hostel or something. And we'd be together for maybe a few days. We'd do worship together, we'd do like just encouragement, different team time. And the leaders would get poured into, and then we would go out to meet with our ministries. And sometimes it would be 2 teams together. Most of the time it was individual places. So you'd go to your ministry, and then at the end of the month you'd come back together. And usually it would be to travel together to the next country. And so then you traveled as a giant group and got going. Well, Europe and the very end, we'd been traveling for so long, they kind of trusted us by that point, and they said, we're not going to meet all up at the same time, this time, between month 10 and 11. You're on your own, and here's your budget, like this is when you need to be there, this is your contact, like figure it out, kind of. So we were independent. So we were having so much trouble getting from the little city we were in Romania to Ukraine. Trains were under construction, like plane flights were way too expensive, like nothing was working. So finally we were looking on all the Ryanair flights that we could find, and we found a flight from the city we were in to Paris. Yeah, not Ukraine. Paris. A little bit. We also ended up having about a week to travel, so we had some time, 5-6 days where we could travel. So we were like, okay, if we get to Paris, then also at the time my dad was living in Germany. And so he had said, if you get approval, you guys could come stay with me in Germany. He was in Bensheim for a few days, and then you guys could fly from Frankfurt to Ukraine, where you need to be for pretty cheap. And so we looked at all the flight options and we did all the calculations and it worked out. It was going to be like 15 euros to fly to Paris and like very cheap bus and then cheap flight. So it was all in budget. So we're like, this is perfect. But we had to get permission obviously from the organization and the leadership structure to be able to do this, even though we've done all our research. So I'm saying all of that to say we got the approval, but it was like 2 days before we were supposed to leave. So now we have our flight, we have no lodging, we have no transportation, like the bus or anything like that, and figured out we just have a flight to Paris now and a flight from Frankfurt to Ukraine. That's what we have figured out. We also have no money at all. So we start looking at like the hostels, we look at all the details, nothing's working out, everything's booked. It's like May or June in Paris. So on a weekend. So we're like, okay, God, well, we believe that like you made all these things come together, so we're gonna go on faith, and this is gonna be an experience of trusting you. We have tents if we have to camp, but it was supposed to rain. So we were just like also praising him from that month of seeing so many specific ways where he'd been showing up, and it was just very, very a kind of perfect example or time for us to step out to like really say, okay, God, we've seen you move. So now we're going to take this step of faith and trust that like you will take care of every need because we think this is the way that you're directing us, which sounds weird, but awesome. None of us had been to Paris either, which seemed, it was very exciting for all of us at the time. So we we got a ride for free from this wonderful woman in our town, took us to the airport, and then at the airport we were like, okay, God, we need lunch, we need food. We don't have money. And I kid you not, we're sitting in the gate for the flight. This is a tiny little town in Romania, and on a Ryanair flight. And there's someone with their family sitting in the gate that knows one of my 4 teammates that I'm with from her hometown in Indiana. Like, they're from the same church in Indiana. And they were sitting there with their family in this gate, getting ready to get on the same plane that we were getting on to go to Paris. And so they have this like reunion. She's been gone for 10 months. And they had sandwiches. They had brought all this food with them. And so they were like, oh, we have sandwiches. Just have some food. Take it. And so we were like, we're an answer to our prayers. Right in front of us. So we got a meal, and so we get on the plane and we fly to Paris, and then we don't realize, because we didn't research that well, that the airport is on the outside of the city, pretty far. Like, really far. And so we had to take a bus or a shuttle like into the city, and that was a lot of money for us. We didn't have the money to do that, so we paid it and just said like, God, this is in our budget, like we are negative now. And so we're getting on the bus, and my 2 teammates, granted mental capacity for Carly, I was the leader and we still had no place to sleep that night. So I was freaking out inside, freaking out, and knew we needed lodging. But was just praying and like had this weird feeling also inside, this like steadiness of like, God, you're gonna show up. I have no idea how, but you're gonna show up. So we get on the bus. My 2 teammates are being very American, being very loud and obnoxious, actually. So they're on the bus, like kind of, oh, we're in Paris, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh. And a Parisian woman gets on the bus and sits down next to one of my teammates and turns to her and goes, I'm going to need for you to be quiet. Okay. And my friend was like, okay. I'm sorry. And she would like never go to fly, like this girl either. And then the woman turned to the window and like leaned against it and fell asleep. And so super like not a good vibe there. But my teammate's sitting next to her and she's just like, I won't make a sound, I won't even breathe. Like just staring at the ground like, won't move. So in front of them is my other teammate and another woman from France. And they end up talking. And so they're having a conversation about, why are you here? Who are you? Where are you from? And so she ends up sharing, I'm on the world race, and what are you doing? I believe in Jesus, da 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 da. And God's been showing up in incredible ways, and like us even being here is an answer to prayer, all this stuff. And so I'm across the aisle praying my heart out that this woman will like know of a place we could stay, or like have a home we could stay in, or something. So I'm praying the whole time. 30 minutes or so goes by. The woman who'd been sleeping sits up, and it's like her entire countenance had changed. I think like her heaviness, like the grumpiness, the anger, like it was gone. Miracle of sleep, and Holy Spirit, because she sat up and she turned to my friend who she yelled at and said, this is interesting, what you guys are doing, will you tell me more? And so my friend ends up telling her what we're doing and everything, very cautiously, but also tells her. And so then the four of them end up talking actually a little bit. And the woman says, I have never done this before, but she said, I have a home, and you can stay with me if you need a place to stay tonight. And we were just like, seriously? And she's like, yeah, here's my number, here's my address, contact me if you can't find anything else. And we were like, okay, thank you so much, like floored by this point. So we get off the bus, we get together, we like pray, and we're like, I think we do this, I think we go. So we end up going to this woman's home, which is a beautiful, like, gorgeous, huge building. She had a flat in this gorgeous 100-year-old building across from a palace in the theater district. Like, gorgeous. And so we ended up going to her home, and we got there a little bit like late, and she just let us like sleep. The next morning we woke up, and she had prepared like a complete spread for us, like this huge breakfast. And it was this sense of like, she goes, I didn't know if you wanted tea or coffee, so I made both. Like it was that feeling of like, have it all. And we're like weary travelers who've just been unsure where we were going to sleep that night. Totally overwhelmed by like goodness of God, just kind of lavishing us with like His provision and seeing us. So we end up going to try to find the bus tickets that we need to take to get to my dad's house in Germany. And we get to the bus place, and they say all the buses are booked for the next 2 days. So we were like, crap, what do we do? And so we ended up calling this woman who we were staying with, and we said, we can find somewhere else to stay. Like, you didn't agree to let us stay for 3 nights, like all this stuff. And she's like, nonsense, like you're staying with me, that's fine. And so we end up staying with this woman for 3 nights. That night she invites her sister over. And they're probably in their 60s, mid-60s. She's a retired literature professor in Paris, and she's an atheist. And so her twin sister comes over for dinner, and they make this beautiful steak dinner. And all the while we get to share a story, and so we actually get to give real testimony and actually talk. And her sister, it was great because we had a witness. Like, her sister was saying, this is so unlike her. She's never done anything like this, ever. Like, this is really bizarre that she's invited you strange Americans, like, into her home. And the woman looked at us. Strange. Yeah. Seriously. And so, the woman I remember looked at us, her name was Giselle. She looked at us and said, thank you. She said, there's something about you that I see. I see, what did she say? There's something about you that I see that is different, and you have a light with you. And we were like, we want to tell you about that light. And so we ended up sharing the gospel with her and her sister. And just like overwhelmed with how God knew, like on the bus, the way that she it started off so wrong in so many ways, and how God completely wrecked our view of like what He could do. Like it just seemed so beautiful that it was the woman that yelled at us that ends up being the one that He uses as a vessel to bless us so completely, so that we could bring the good news to her. And so we ended up having an incredible time with her, had a wonderful time with her sister as well. Formed a relationship, got to share life, got to share story. And really we're just overwhelmed with God's provision through that entire time. So we spent 3 days in Paris unexpectedly, where God was just showing off. Like, he was just showing off. We'd show up at a museum, and the opening times would be on every other Thursday from 1 to 4, and it'd be like 1:30 on that Thursday, that specific day. So we'd show up just at exactly the right time, without planning it, where God just was setting our feet in the places where we needed to be. And so the last story from that part of the journey was we decided to go to the Louvre. We wanted to see all the art. And so we got there 30 minutes before it opened, or 30 minutes before we were allowed to get in. And so, of course, the girls had to go to the bathroom. So we all went to the girls' line, which was like 50 people long. And we get in line and we're waiting, and we have a map to the Louvre in English, and we're just holding it like that. And so the woman in front of us turns around, and she said, "Oh, I'm looking for a map in English. Can you tell me where you got that?" And so we told her, and she was with her son, and her son went to get it. And so she started a conversation, and we said, "You sound American, and so where are you from?" And, you know, started a conversation. And she listened to our story and just said, "You're an answer to my prayer." And we were like, "What?" She said, "I'm an international businesswoman, and I travel to Europe all the time. And I've been feeling really, really lonely because I haven't had a lot of connection to other believers, but I love Jesus. And I've been praying that I would meet believers on my trips and be encouraged by what God is doing in Europe." And we were just sitting there in the line for the bathroom, like, "God, this is so good. Like, this is so cool." And so we got to just encourage one another, really encourage her. We prayed for her in line. And so we're getting closer to, like, actually going into the stalls. And I think, yeah, she was in front of me. And as it was her turn, she turned around to me and she said, "I just feel like God wants me to do this. So don't, like, say no, just take it." And she hands me something. And she hands me money. So she puts it in my hand, and then she goes into the bathroom stall. And so it was my turn to go to my bathroom stall, and so then I look at the money that she had given me, and it was the exact amount to the euro that we had spent on the buses to get from the airport to the middle of the city 2 weeks before. And so it was awesome. Jesus was totally setting us exactly where we needed to be at exactly the time that we needed to be there. And it wasn't because we had everything like figured out or that we had it all together. It was that we were willing and open to saying yes to this crazy adventure with Jesus. And we were, learning how to walk in step with His Spirit. Ask Him. We were learning to listen. We were learning to kind of let go of our own perceptions or ideas and really lean into what He could do and trust that He would show up, because we were learning His character as well. And so each of those moments where we saw Him show up in such specific, tangible ways just continued to confirm and encourage that relationship with Him. And so we were really like built up in our hearts with being able to trust Him. And so those are just a few of the stories. We also, we saw God healing in Africa. That was when we were in Tanzania. Were a few of the moments where I personally, it was my first real time like praying for people, like praying for healing for people. And it was kind of intimidating, a little bit scary for me at the time, because this was very new for me to step out into. And I remember one of the things on the World Race, you had to be willing, especially as a leader, to whatever they asked you to do, you just had to say yes. So like, we're doing a conference and you're preaching every day, like, or like whatever, or like somebody needs to share and you get to be the person. And so I was learning to empower the team as well, but also to learning to be a servant leader and to show up. And so in Tanzania, they drove us way out in the jungle. We drove like 5 hours out in the middle of the rainforest jungle. And they said, "We're having a conference with the local believers and you guys are going to lead it." Which ended up actually, we had like a small piece, and then these services would go like 8, 9, 10 hours, like just it kept going, it kept going. And at the end of one, I think it was in the middle of the week, because it was a week-long conference that they were having. And granted, this is in like a hut. Like this is like palm branch hut. There's no sound system. There's no like, it's just hot and we're in the jungle. And at the end, and the pastors don't give you warning or anything. They just say things and you're like, okay, that's what's happening. So the pastor at the end of this night goes, and now everyone who wants healing is going to come to the missionary's house and they're going to pray for you. You're like, yes we are. It hasn't been a 10-hour day. Come on over. Sure. So we go to our little like hut place that we're staying. And I kid you not, there were over 100 people that lined out the door. So it was just a line in this jungle. And we're just sitting, and I remember we were sitting in this dark hut on these couches, 2 of us here and 2 of us here. And so we kind of got them to like go in 2 different lines and we just prayed for whatever they wanted prayer for or whatever the Holy Spirit put on our hearts, and we saw people healed. And like, it was so intimidating as we walk into this hut and see all these people lining up, but also so encouraging to see their faith and like to see, how God could just push past that fear and just say like, I want a willing heart. You know me. You know I heal. You believe, who I say I am. So now it's time to practice. And so I specifically remember that night we saw people like who had lung, like breathing issues, completely healed. People with like that were walking that were in pain in their legs, like no more pain. I wish I could remember even more specifics, but I just remember there was like a lot of celebration, and it wasn't every person. Like that was the other thing that we learned, was trusting that God was working and that each person's story was beautiful and unique, and that all our job was to say yes, like to show up and to listen to Him. And so, so Tanzania really like, I think, wrecked me for seeing God as healer, God of the miraculous. I personally got to pray for our translator during that month because she was having stomach digestion issues and like severe pain, like cramping, while we were walking from village to village. And felt the Holy Spirit saying like, you should pray for her, which was really scary for me. And I did it, and she was totally healed. Just in the middle of the dirt road, like walking from one house to another. And so like that experience for me just continued to remind me of like this God who He is who He says He is, and we can trust in that truth. And so part of my heart, even getting to share some of these stories is that like we can walk in that, and it's not because I was in Tanzania that this happened. Like it's because of what God was doing in my life, just showing who He was, and it's because I stepped out and said yes. And so I wanted to share a verse to kind of bring kind of a close. 2 different things. One, also God reminded me that when we say yes, sometimes we don't even know the huge ripple that it can have, the impact that it can have on people's journeys. And so I think this is such a cool thing about community. One of the ways that God showed me tangibly how my yes to going on a world race, which was a scary and big thing to do, took a lot of courage, directly impacted people in my circles. And so one of my closest friends, his name was Ryan, he ended up going on the world race the next year, radically changed his life. There was a teacher, I was a teacher before I went on the world race, and in the middle school I was teaching in, there's another teacher. She ended up following the blog that I had all year, ended up going on the world race the next year, radically changed her life. And when I was in Nepal, I had a team of students I was leading. 2 of those girls heard my testimony and ended up going on the world race after they were done with Nepal. And so I don't say that to like build me up in any way. I'm just saying like, because I said yes at that time, I had no idea the lives that would end up like being impacted by the things that I was just sharing about what I was experiencing. And so that like is an encouragement, I hope, that when you say yes, like you have no idea the kind of ways that God can use that courage, that faithfulness, that yes, to impact. Like, no way. And it's really fun when God shows you some of those ways, and we don't always get to know. But the other thing too is that God's reminding me, and it was really cool because I was flipping through my Bible as I was preparing, and God kept bringing me back to Acts. I've been spending a lot of time in Acts lately. And specifically to this verse that I don't remember reading before. I'm sure I have, but God was highlighting it today. And it's Acts 28:30. And it's just a little sentence at the end of Acts. Because I've been reading about Paul's journey and the things that God was doing in and through Paul. Like Paul being this person who we can like kind of see as example of like one who went out, that God used his testimony radically. And verse 30 says, "For 2 whole years, Paul stayed there in his own rented house and welcomed all who came to see him. Boldly and without hindrance, he preached the kingdom of God and taught about the Lord Jesus Christ." And what was really like jumping out of the page to me today as I wrote this was, God, you created us to be missional people. You haven't created us necessarily like some to go out and some to stay. And some, there's different seasons in our life where we go and where we stay. Paul to me is like this like shining example of one who went out. And so for me to read a verse where 2 whole years he stayed in the house where he rented and preached the kingdom and preached the gospel with the power of the Holy Spirit. And that just like, I don't know, it just really like impacted me today of like, God, let us be people that are missional, that are pursuing your kingdom, that are seeing people where we are, asking for a yes heart right where we are. And if you say go, that we go. But if you say stay, that we stay. And then it's not about the like awesome, amazing story in India. Like it's about being missional, right? So like the part of my story that like I'm so thankful for the ways that God shaped me and used me. And honestly, he had to kind of take me out of comfort zone, put me in a very sweaty, uncomfortable, at times like challenging community environment that shaped and made me who I was. And I'm super thankful for that. But I'm also super thankful for the times where he's teaching me in my workplace how to be missional and how to say yes and how to be listening to his spirit, how to be praying for healing. And so I think that's a really like important thing that I think as community we can encourage each other in, is that we're called to live mission, to live out our identities more fully in who God's created us to be. And so I share awesome stories, but you guys can share the same stories right here from Heidelberg. Because it just takes saying yes, and he gives you the courage. And sometimes it does take taking that step. I had to apply to the World Race. I had to raise the money, step out, and I had to trust him to provide and take steps where I couldn't see what was going to happen at all. It's fun to think about it later, but I'm like, in the moment, I was really scared. And God showed up every time. And so, so that's what's really, I think, amazing and cool and fun for me to get to share. Because I can stand here as testimony that when you step out in faith, God shows up every time. He does. And sometimes it doesn't look like what we thought it was going to look like. And that's okay. Because he's so faithful. He's so faithful to place us where we're supposed to be. And so, so my prayer for all of us is that we can say yes to him by pressing in, learning to listen to his voice. That it's about, about intimacy with the Father and listening for his voice. And so he will guide. And so as we get to share and encourage each other in the testimonies of what he's doing, there's so much that he's doing here in Heidelberg. And I'm excited to get to be here, and I'm excited to remember the ways that he's been faithful in my life. And I'm excited to hear the stories of how he's been faithful in yours. And so, so I hope that the stories of encouragement.
Any further questions or comments or underlining, like just affirm or interact with Carly a little? Then we're going to go do some small groups.
Because there's all kinds of, there's funny stories too. When you live in community with people, there's like moments.
What's the most challenging moment in the team?
In the team? There were several.
Most challenging.
One that comes to mind in particular, I don't know if it was the most, but one that comes to mind in particular was in leadership, so they asked me to become a leader, but there was someone on my team that was older than me. And so she was very offended, actually, that she wasn't asked to be the leader. And so moving into our first few months together were really hard, because there was a lot of conflict that kind of ended up having to be addressed very directly. And I'm a peacemaker, so I do not enjoy that. But as the leader, I really had to face it for full on, and that was really, really challenging for me. Ended up being really good, because in us learning to be very direct and honest with each other and kind of admit our own faults and learn how to love each other through that in a very uncomfortable environment as well. We were living in a tree house with a lot of bugs that month, not sleeping very well. Then we learned how to love each other through it. And so, even though that was one of the most challenging, it ended up being really good, because I think we both grew from it a lot. But there were a lot of uncomfortable moments too, just when you are traveling around the world. We arrived in Cambodia and no one was there to meet us. We were just dropped off in the middle of a rice paddy. And it was my first month as a leader of the 6th female team, and we're just dropped in the middle of nowhere at night. In the dark, and I'm like...
What happened?
We waited for an hour, and then the ministry host came. Just in the middle of the field, and I was just praying, God, I have no plan B. I have no idea what to do. And then they came. But, yeah, lots of moments of being challenged. Spiritually, we were in Thailand for a month, and we did ministry in the red light area. And so we were working with a ministry that worked with women in prostitution and who'd been trafficked. And so we went in small teams into very, very dark places. The ministry host used to call it the devil's playground, because it was just so crazy. But cool, because one of the owners of one of the biggest clubs in that area, that is all open, ended up getting to know the ministry leader that we were working with, our host, and they ended up forming a relationship. And he was, of course, trying to love on him and show him Jesus, but also just formed a friendship. And so the club owner found out through the leader that we had musicians on our team. And so he said, well, if you guys want to do a concert on Friday night, my place would be really busy, so you're welcome to come have a concert. And so we were like, okay, you know what kind of musicians we are? Great. And so my friend Kurt, who's super gifted in leading worship, led a worship concert in the middle of this club, in the middle of the red light area. That was totally, you could hear music blaring, and there's neon lights, and there's pimps, and there's prostitutes, everybody you can imagine is there. And we were singing worship songs, but it was incredible, because it didn't feel like you were the odd one out or something. It actually was kingdom invading dark. And so I would say it's one time, one of the most clear moments in my life where I've seen directly light and darkness, literally coming in contact, and feeling how God was he was drawing people in. So random people would come in, what is this music? What are you doing? And then we got to share gospel and share Jesus with them. And so several people ended up getting contact information later. One guy came to buy a girl, ended up donating his money to our mission instead of buying a girl that night, because he was so impacted by talking to one of my teammates. And so just ways that God really showed up in surprising ways. But that was also a very challenging month. It was spiritually very heavy, very dark, so we always had half the team praying while half the team was out, and then we'd switch. During the daytime, we'd do prayer walks and ask the Holy Spirit for words and pictures and different things, and then we'd go out that night to the places that the Holy Spirit had made clear. Because once you were out there at night, you couldn't, it was too chaotic. Like you just felt overwhelmed unless you kind of had a plan and knew people were praying. And so it was pretty intense, but also saw God moving, made some really cool connections there.